Smoke curled from the sky like wounded serpents, black and choking. The peaceful colony of Arva's 9 had never seen war before. Birds didn't sing. Children didn't laugh. Every building stood still, cracked and quiet like a graveyard. That peace had been broken 3 days ago, when the first alien machines fell from orbit like falling stars. The humans didn't start the war, but they didn't run from it either. Not when the alien mechs crushed entire towns. Not when the skies turned red with fire. And not when the alien commander sent a message declaring Earth species too primitive to survive. Lay down your weapons, the message said, and you will be spared. But humans didn't listen, because they knew one truth that the aliens didn't. Fear doesn't win wars. Willpower does. Among the scattered survivors was a man named Cad. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He had been delivering water filters to a farming outpost when the war began. Now he held a broken metal pipe like a sword, breathing heavy, watching the mech stomp closer through the rubble. The alien war machines stood taller than houses. Their armor was black and blue, smooth as bone, yet stronger than steel. They moved like beasts, fast and brutal, crushing everything beneath them. Civilians screamed as another mech fired a pulse cannon, turning a transport truck into a ball of flame. Cade's ears rang. He ducked behind a shattered wall, gripping the pipe tighter. Around him, people scattered. He could run too. He could hide. But something inside him refused, something raw, something old. He looked up at the towering machine, its glowing red eyes scanning for survivors. He didn't understand what came over him. Maybe it was rage, maybe it was instinct. Or maybe, maybe, it was the thing the aliens feared most: human unpredictability. He stood and stepped out from the shadows, walking straight toward the mech. The alien pilot inside noticed him. The mech turned, target locked, but Cade didn't stop. The pipe felt warm in his hands. His heartbeat matched the pulse of the world around him. As the mech raised its arm to fire, Cad sprinted forward like a missile of flesh and fury. No one knew how he did it. The cameras caught only flashes, a jump, a twist, the sound of metal breaking. Cade wasn't a trained warrior, but he fought with everything. He tore open armor plates with bare hands, ripping cables free like vines. He climbed the machine like it was a living wall. The mech stumbled, its arm sparked. The weapon dropped. Screams from the crowd turned to gasps. No one had ever seen a human fight a mech like that before. No one thought it was possible. But there he was, ripping the war machine apart like it was made of paper. Inside the cockpit, the alien pilot panicked. Her name was Zalara, a commander bred from birth to be perfect. She had never lost. Until now, her sensors failed. Her limbs froze. Warning lights blinked like sirens. She tried to eject, but the system jammed. And then silence. The mech collapsed. Onto one knee, shaking the earth. Sparks flew. Fire crackled. From a vent near the chest, the cockpit hissed open. Smoke poured out. And there she was, tall, blue-skinned, and stunningly beautiful. Her silver hair flowed like light. Her armored suit flickered with damage. But she raised her hands slowly. In surrender, the crowd stared in disbelief. Even the other mechs paused. Cade stood there, chest rising and falling, his face covered in ash and sweat. His eyes met hers. No words were spoken. None were needed. Something had changed that moment, something bigger than both of them. Across the battlefield, hidden cameras recorded the entire scene. Across planets, people would watch it again and again. A human had defeated a war mech with no weapons, no training, and no armor. The galaxy had witnessed something terrifying, not because of power, but because of what it meant. They had misjudged humanity. And now they would pay the price. Zalara had trained her entire life to become a war pilot. She had broken records in the simulator and crushed enemies on more than 7 worlds. No one had ever made her retreat before. But now she stood in. The rebel with her hands raised, staring at a human who didn't even have armor. She didn't understand how it happened. She replayed the fight in her mind, searching for logic, for science, for some mistaken calculation. But nothing explained how a soft-fleshed creature ripped through a battle mech using only his bare hands. The other mech stood still, waiting for orders. The alien command ship above sent no signal. Zalara's failure had shocked them all. Even her own soldiers were afraid to move, uncertain what would happen next. The human stood quietly, watching her without speaking. Cade didn't feel like a hero. His arms ached. Blood dripped from his fingers. He had acted on instinct, not plan. But he also didn't regret it. Not for a second. He looked at the alien woman, her glowing blue skin streaked with ash and sparks. Civilians began to crawl out of hiding. A child peeked from behind a broken crate. A woman cried and reached for her wounded partner. All around them, people slowly returned to life. They had seen something impossible. And because of that, they now believed survival was possible. Zalara lowered her hands. She didn't run. She didn't attack. She stepped closer, moving slowly so no one would fire. Cade didn't flinch, he simply waited. The world around them burned, but they stood in the middle of it like statues from 2 different worlds. "I could have killed you," she said. Her voice was soft, mechanical from the translation chip, but the meaning was clear. Cade tilted, his head slightly, as if waiting for the rest. She looked at her broken mech, then back at him. "But I didn't, because I think you're not what we were told." Cade didn't reply with words. He turned and walked away. Not as a threat, not as a warning, but as a message. That humans didn't need to speak to be understood. That actions meant more than any alien broadcast or hologram message. Zalara watched him go. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something else. Something deeper. She had met monsters on the battlefield. But this human wasn't a monster. He was something worse for her people. He was hope. The council aboard her fleet ship watched the feed in silence. Generals shifted in their seats. The High Commander narrowed his eyes and tapped a sharp finger on the table. "Retrieve her," he ordered. "Bring Zalara back. And start scanning for that human's identity." On Earth's military channels, the footage spread like wildfire. Soldiers across distant planets paused to watch it. Resistance fighters in tunnels cheered. Even the old veterans raised their heads and said one word they hadn't used in years: fight. Zalara was taken back to her fleet ship under heavy guard. But she said nothing. She let them pull her away, her thoughts spinning in ways they never had before. She no longer believed the enemy was weak. She no longer believed the war was simple. Deep in a medical tent, Cade sat while a medic tried to wrap his hands. The injuries were real, but they were not what mattered. What mattered was that the mech was broken. The alien had surrendered, and people had seen it. And that changed everything. A soldier entered and handed Cade a tablet. It showed a message encrypted. Alien language, but decoded quickly. A name repeated several times: Zalara. The message was clear. She had not reported him as a war criminal. She had called him worthy. He didn't know what that meant. But he understood one thing: the war wasn't over, not yet. And next time, they wouldn't send just one mech. They'd send an army. He looked at the stars above, then at the people gathering outside the tent. Fear was gone. In its place, something new burned inside them. The aliens had expected fear to win. But they had awakened something older. Something buried deep inside. Every human who had ever been pushed too far. And now that it was awake, there was no going back. Zalara sat alone in her chamber aboard the warship. The walls were silver and cold, humming with quiet power. Outside the window, stars crawled by like glowing insects. But her mind wasn't on space. It was on the man who had shattered her mech. With nothing but human strength, she had reviewed the footage dozens of times. His moves were chaotic, not trained. But each strike had purpose. Each motion held something wild, something fierce, something not found in simulations or alien archives. She paused the video on his face and stared at it again. He didn't wear armor. He didn't show fear. He didn't even speak during the fight. But everything about him screamed one thing: unbreakable. Zalara had faced many enemies before, but none like him. None that made her question everything she had learned since childhood. The door behind her opened with a soft hiss. Her second-in-command entered, armor polished and stiff. "Commander," he said, voice flat, "the Council demands a report." Zalara didn't look up. She simply tapped the screen, letting the image of the human flicker and vanish. "I gave them my words already," she said. "If they want more, they can come and ask themselves." The officer hesitated. He had never seen her like this. Quiet, unmoving, unshaken, but thoughtful. He saluted and stepped back out of the room without another word. Down on the ruined surface of Arva's 9, Cade walked through what remained of the outpost. The people had started rebuilding. A few had weapons now. Others had tools. Everyone had hope, and all of them looked at him differently. Like he was something more than just a man. He didn't want fame. He didn't want praise. He just wanted peace. But peace had a price. And right now, that price was preparing for the next fight. He found an empty clearing beside a wrecked transport and began training again. Bruised fists pounding into a broken hull. The resistance had seen the footage too. Messages poured in from nearby sectors. Fighters, scouts, even deserters asked about the human. Who was he? Where did he learn to fight like that? Could he lead? Could he teach others? Some even called him the Breaker. Cade didn't answer them. He didn't care about names or titles, but he knew the truth. The aliens had sent a message when they dropped those mechs on peaceful colonies. So now Earth would send one back. And this time, it wouldn't be words. It would be action. A shuttle landed nearby. Dust blew into the air. 2 resistance leaders stepped out, their uniforms scarred by battles past. They walked up to Cade without speaking at first. One of them nodded. The other handed him a small device. It showed a star map and coordinates. "This is where they build the mechs," the taller one said. "A factory orbiting a gas giant, guarded, hidden. But if it's destroyed, their production slows, maybe even stops." Cade stared at the map, then looked at the sky. He didn't smile. He just nodded once. Back on the warship, Zalara stood. Before the High Council, holograms flickered around her. The elders' faces were sharp, some cold, some angry. "You lost," one hissed. "You surrendered to a primitive." Zalara didn't blink. She raised her chin and answered with calm fire. "I didn't lose to a primitive," she said. "I met something we were never trained to face. You call them weak, but they're not. You call them simple, but they're not. That human was stronger than any weapon we've built. And now that they've seen us bleed, they will not stop," the council argued. Voices rose and fell. But one thing became clear to them all: this was no longer a quiet occupation, it was war. And it would not be won with just machines and fear. The humans had awoken something powerful. Something old. Something terrifying. In his tent under the stars, Cade sat alone. The cap was quiet. But inside his mind, fire burned. He wasn't sure if he was ready. But readiness no longer mattered. The aliens had drawn first blood. Now it was humanity's turn to strike back. He closed his eyes, breathed slowly, and whispered to himself, "No armor. No rules, just grit." The shuttle was quiet as it left Arva's 9 behind. Cade sat with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the star map hovering before him. The coordinates of the mech factory pulsed in red. Around him, resistance fighters checked their gear. None of them spoke. They all knew the risk. It wasn't just another attack. This was their chance to hit the enemy where it hurt most. If they could destroy the factory, it would shake the alien war effort. But they also knew what waited for them. Heavy defenses, armed drones, elite guards. Failure meant death. Cade didn't ask for backup. He didn't care for plans filled with too many steps. He believed in one thing, getting close and breaking what needed to be broken. The others followed not because of orders, but because they had seen him do the impossible. As the ship neared the target, the factory came into view. It floated in the thick clouds of a red gas giant, covered in spikes and dark plating. Weapon turrets lined the perimeter. Patrol drones hovered like hungry insects. It looked like a fortress built by fear. Inside the factory, alien engineers worked without rest. Rows of new mechs stood ready, their glowing cores charging. Every hour, more machines came online. Every day, more death would follow. The aliens didn't care who they crushed, as long as they won the war. But that day, something changed. An alert rang through the station. One of the patrol drones spotted the incoming shuttle. Sirens blared. Guards rushed to their stations. The factory's command AI activated all defense protocols. The humans were coming. The resistance fighters jumped as soon as the shuttle reached low orbit. They used drop pods to crash through the outer hull. Explosions tore through the landing decks. Smoke and flame followed them as they fought their way inward. But Cade moved faster than all of them. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't need one. Every enemy that stood in his path was thrown aside like paper. Mechs activated mid-build to stop him, but he ripped their arms off before they could fully rise. Sparks flew with every strike. Alarms screamed in panic. Zalara watched the invasion from a council warship nearby. They had ordered her to observe, not interfere. But she couldn't stay silent. She leaned forward, eyes narrowed, as Cade broke through wall after wall. Something inside her stirred, and it wasn't fear. The human wasn't just fighting. He was sending a message to the aliens, to the galaxy, that Earth wouldn't kneel. That brute machines were no match for willpower. That flesh and bone, when filled with purpose, could shatter anything built from metal. Back inside the factory, Cade reached the core chamber. The heart of the station pulsed with energy. Large tubes fed power to the mech assembly lines. Guards tried to stop him. They failed. One by one, they fell. Not because he was faster, but because he never hesitated. He pulled open a power conduit and yanked out its glowing core. The floor shook. Warning lights turned red. The entire station began to fail. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Metal groaned. I tried to lock him inside, but he slammed through the exit with brute force. From her ship, Zalara stood and whispered, "He's doing it." Around her, officers shouted, debating whether to retreat or fight. But she already knew what the right move was. She turned to her pilot and gave a command that shocked everyone. "Pull back. Let them take it. If he survives, I want him brought to me, alive." The resistance team evacuated just as the factory exploded. Fire burst from every level. The shockwave shook nearby ships. One mech drifted into the gas giant and vanished. The humans had done it. They had crippled one of the enemy's strongest weapons. Back on the shuttle, Cade collapsed into a seat. His hands bled again. His chest rose and fell like a drum. No cheers filled the cabin. No medals were handed out. Just silent looks between fighters who now believed they might just win. They all looked to him. Not because he asked for it, but because they needed someone who didn't give up. Someone who stood when others ran. Someone who turned fear into fuel. And Cade, for the first time, said something to them all. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. News of the destroyed mech factory spread fast. Across the galaxy, Screens played the footage of the explosion again and again. Some cheered. Others stared in shock. For the first time, the alien empire looked vulnerable. And the symbol of that fear was a single human named Cade. In the capital world of the alien dominion, high leaders gathered in silence. Their faces were pale with confusion and anger. The room was filled with floating data screens, each showing wreckage, loss reports, and clips of Cade tearing through metal like it was cloth. He is not trained. He is not enhanced. And yet he brings ruin, one elder growled. What is this madness? Another stood and raised a hand. This is no madness. This is humanity. And we should be afraid. They tried to erase the footage, but it was too late. The people had already seen it. Even among the alien soldiers, doubt began to grow. If a single human could destroy what they believed was unbreakable, what could? Many humans drew together. Zalara stood alone in the warship's viewing chamber. She watched the explosion from the edge of space, hands behind her back. She had followed orders. She had not interfered. But something in her chest twisted with every second she watched Cade on the screen. He had become more than just a soldier. He was a force, a warning, a turning point. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew the Empire would not remain the same. And neither would she. Cade sat beside a fire in a desert outpost, far from cities and eyes. The Resistance had offered him protection, food, shelter, even command. He had refused them all. He wanted space. But what he wanted didn't matter anymore. People still followed him. A group of fighters approached him, carrying supplies and maps. They knelt without being told. One of them, a woman named Rika, handed him a scanner. They're building again, she said. Bigger this time, stronger. They've learned from last time. Cade didn't speak for a while. He stared into the fire. His hands still carried scars from the factory battle. His back ached every morning, but none of that stopped him. He looked at the scanner, then up at Rika. Then we hit them harder. Across space, alien engineers worked day and night. They constructed a new mech model called the Juggernaut. It was twice as tall, 3 times as fast, and equipped with adaptive armor. It was built for one reason, to kill the human who broke their machines. Zalara read the design reports. She knew they were overreacting, but fear did that. And in that fear, they had missed something. They kept building machines. But the problem was never just metal. The problem was belief. Humans believed they could win, and sometimes, belief alone was enough to break logic. The new mech was transported to a testing ground on a barren moon. It stood tall, surrounded by guards and drones. Scientists whispered its name with pride. Pilots watched with awe. The Empire declared that the next time the human showed his face, he would be crushed. But Cade was already planning. He didn't fear new armor or faster weapons. He had no secret technology. He had no support fleet. What he had was fire inside his chest and people ready to fight beside him. One night, Zalara stood at a balcony on her ship, watching stars drift. A message arrived, a coded signal. She opened it, expecting another report, but it wasn't that. It was a single line. From him, you don't need armor to stand for something. She stared at it for a long time. Her heart beat louder. Not in fear, but in something closer to hope. She didn't report the message. She deleted the logs, and she whispered to herself, maybe I chose the wrong side. Asterisk. The Juggernaut mech stood like a mountain of death on the battlefield moon. Its surface glowed with shifting armor plates that adapted to heat, impact, and speed. Its eyes burned red, scanning everything around it. The Empire had built it with one goal in mind, to erase the human who had made them bleed. Zalara watched the test footage in silence. The mech crushed training bots in seconds. It moved like a living storm. Every shot it fired shattered walls. The engineers clapped and shouted, proud of their creation. But Zalara remained quiet. She saw one flaw no one else mentioned. They still believed fear would win. Fear didn't stop Cade on Arva's 9. Fear didn't stop him at the Mech factory. Fear didn't stop the resistance from growing stronger each day. The Empire kept building. Metal monsters, but they had never learned why Cade couldn't be stopped. Cade trained harder now. His body ached, but his focus sharpened. He didn't care about the pain. Every strike he threw into stone was a message to the aliens. Every breath he took under pressure was a promise to the people watching him from hidden corners of the galaxy. He wasn't trying to be a symbol. He never wanted that. But when people lose everything, they look for someone who still stands. And Cade had never fallen. Rika returned from a recon mission. She dropped her gear and showed Cade a new map. They moved the Juggernaut to Sector V-21, she said. They want you to come for it. It's bait. They're waiting. Cade nodded slowly. Then let them wait. The Resistance didn't argue. They had stopped questioning his choices. Not because he was perfect, but because he never acted out of pride. He acted with purpose. And that purpose had carried them this far. They launched a stealth vessel toward the sector. Small, fast, silent. Cade sat inside, his fists wrapped, eyes closed. Around him, a few fighters sat ready, but none would join the final strike. This battle wasn't theirs. It was his alone. The moon below was covered in dust and metal ruins. Drones scanned the skies. Traps waited in every direction. The Juggernaut stood in the center like a king daring someone to challenge it. And Cade walked straight into its sight without slowing down. The alien pilot inside activated weapons. Cannons turned. Missiles loaded. Ground spikes shot from hidden pits. But Cade didn't run. He leapt forward, sliding under blasts and braking. Through the dust cloud like a phantom, the first hit sent shock through his arm, but he didn't stop. He climbed the Mech side, avoiding the shifting armor plates. His fingers found weak joints. His feet gripped scorched metal. The Juggernaut tried to shake him off, but it wasn't fast enough. Inside the cockpit, the alien pilot screamed in disbelief. "He's not enhanced. He's not trained. How is this possible?" The voice trembled, but Cade didn't answer. He reached the neck joint and drove his elbow into the vent until metal cracked open. He dropped inside like a bolt of lightning. The alien pulled a blade, but Cade caught the arm and twisted it away. The cockpit filled with sparks as cables tore, and screens exploded. Cade looked the pilot in the eyes and gave him a chance to surrender. The pilot spit and cursed. Cade knocked him unconscious. Outside, the Juggernaut Mech dropped to its knees. Dust flew. Drones hovered in panic. The Resistance fighters watched. From a distance, stunned again. Cade climbed out through the wrecked cockpit and dropped onto the ground. He didn't raise his arms. He didn't shout. He simply walked away from the machine that was supposed to kill him. Zalara watched from a hidden ship above. She turned away from the screen and gave a single order to her crew. "Land. I'm going to speak to him myself." The dust had barely settled when Zalara's ship landed on the cracked surface of the moon. Its engines hissed as it touched down. Cade stood near the broken Juggernaut, arms by his sides, body covered in dirt and sweat. He didn't move when the ship's ramp opened. Zalara stepped out alone. No weapons, no guards, no armor. She walked slowly, her silver hair catching the moonlight. Her boots crunched over debris as she approached him. Cade didn't speak. He simply waited as she came closer. They stood a few feet apart. Neither looked angry, neither looked afraid. The battlefield was silent around them. No soldiers, no fire. Just two people who had once been enemies, now facing something neither could define with words. "You broke it," she said, glancing at the Juggernaut. "Behind him. That Mech was our answer to you. It was supposed to end this war." Her voice didn't carry pride or blame, only quiet truth. Cade nodded once, his eyes never leaving hers. It wasn't your machine that failed, he said. It was your reason for building it. Zalara looked down for a moment. She understood what he meant. They had built weapons hoping fear would control the future. But fear had only brought them here. She looked at him again and said, I'm not here to fight. I came because I believe this has to end. Cade didn't reply right away. His fingers twitched slightly. He had heard lies before, but this didn't feel like one. Her voice held weight, not tricks. Zalara stepped closer. When I first met you, I saw a threat. Now I see something else. Something I don't fully understand. But I know this. If we keep going like this, nothing will be left. Her words came with effort, each one heavy like stone. Cade let the silence hang for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice low. What do you want? Zalara didn't hesitate. I want peace. But not the kind where one side kneels. I want real peace. You've shown us strength, but also restraint. That's something our leaders never expected. Cade looked at the stars above. The galaxy had watched him fight. They had made him a symbol. But symbols could break if left alone too long. He turned back to her and said, Peace needs more than words. It needs action. And it needs trust. Zalara reached into her jacket. Slowly, Cade tensed, but she pulled out a small data crystal. This has the locations of our main factories, our command routes, even the supply chains. If I give this to you, the resistance will win faster. She extended the crystal toward him. Cade stared at it, then at her. She wasn't lying. She was risking her life, maybe even her entire future. He took it carefully and slipped it into his pouch without a word. Behind them, the resistance shuttle arrived. Rika stepped out, confused at first, but didn't raise her weapon. She saw the two standing face to face and understood that something had shifted. She nodded at Cade without speaking. Cade looked back at Zalara. What will they do when they find out what you've done? She shrugged gently. They might execute me or exile me. But if it means ending this war, then it's worth it. Her voice didn't shake. She meant it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Cade took a step back and nodded. Zalara turned and walked back to her ship. She paused at the ramp, looked over her shoulder, and said one final thing. Next time we meet, I hope it's not on a battlefield. Then she vanished inside, and for the first time since the war began, Cade felt something that had once seemed impossible. Hope. Asterisk. The data crystal changed everything. Resistance leaders studied its contents with wide eyes and silent gasps. Maps unfolded before them. Hidden routes, fuel lines, weak points in their enemy's armor. For the first time, they weren't fighting in the dark. Word of Zalara's betrayal reached the Empire within hours. Some called her a traitor. Others called her a coward. But a few, only a few, began to wonder if she had done the right thing. Deep inside, many were already tired of endless war. The council demanded her arrest. Ships were sent. Orders were shouted. But Zalara didn't run. She stayed on a neutral space station under false identification. She watched the stars and waited, knowing that the fire she had lit would not go out. Cade led the final assault on the central command base. It was hidden in the asteroid belt of a cold system far from any sun. Drones flew in tight circles. Cannons lined the rocks. Every approach had been rigged to kill. But Cade didn't care about odds. He moved with purpose, striking like a hammer through steel. His team followed behind, clearing paths, disabling traps. They didn't need luck. They had resolve. And they had something more dangerous than any weapon belief. The Empire didn't surrender easily. Officers barked orders until their last breath. Mechs stormed out of underground tunnels. Explosions lit up the asteroid's surface. But slowly, inch by inch, the resistance advanced. Cade tore through the enemy's last defense. His body was bruised and bloodied, but he didn't stop. He reached the command core and planted the final charges. As the system began to collapse, he looked around one last time and nodded. They had done it. The war machine was breaking. The Empire would survive, but it would never again rule with fear. Its claws had been snapped. Its teeth dulled. The galaxy would never forget who did it. He stepped out of the collapsing structure just before the detonation. Fire danced behind him. The ground shook. Resistance fighters cheered. Ships blinked their lights in victory. And somewhere far away, children would soon sleep without fear. Weeks passed. Battles ended. Treaties were signed. Some planets celebrated. Others mourned. But all of them understood one thing: balance had returned. Not because of armies, but because of a single man who stood when no one else did. Cade didn't stay in the spotlight. He vanished from the main stage. No medals, no interviews. He returned to quiet places, helping rebuild what had been broken. Some say he never stopped moving. Others say he watched from a distance. Zalara received a message one day. It had no words. Just a location. A small garden on a floating station. Above a green world. She went there, unsure of what to expect. But when she arrived, she found him waiting, sitting beside a growing tree. They didn't speak at first. They simply sat in silence, listening to wind chimes made of scrap metal. Then Zalara finally said, "Was it worth it?" Cade looked at her, his face calm, and gave a single nod. "Yes, because now, people can choose their future." She smiled softly. Her eyes held no regret, just peace. The kind neither of them had known before the war. A child ran past them, laughing. Human, alien, it didn't matter. The war was over. Life had begun again. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by blooming plants and distant stars, two former enemies shared something rare: understanding.